I'm Senator Joe Lieberman, and I'm glad you're watching Rabbi Doug.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight. But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're going to watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug.
Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're going to see Rabbi Doug. Oh, everybody talk about Doug.
Shalom and welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. We are here in Rosemont, Illinois, with a friend visiting from Washington, D.C., Ambassador Dennis Ross. Ambassador, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It is such a pleasure. I met Ambassador Ross in Washington, D.C. when he was speaking with APAC, and it is always a pleasure to hear him because he is so articulate and knows so much about things that none of us really know about. And he also has his new book out, which I want you to see here. It's called, and I'll read it from the top, it's called Doomed to Succeed, but it says The U.S.-Israeli Relationship from Truman to Obama, Doomed to Succeed by Dennis Ross, and it's your fourth book.
The missing piece was my first book. I wrote a book called Statecraft, which is on the essence of statecraft and diplomacy, and then I wrote a book called Missed Solutions in Peace about the Middle East. That I co-authored with David Makovsky.
So
three of the books are ones I've done by myself, and I did one as a co-author.
All right. Well, I want to talk a little bit about you because you are so politically in a world where other people aren't. You have been awarded the Presidential Medal for Distinguished Federal Civilian Service by President Clinton. You worked under so many administrations. You are a graduate of UCLA. You have your doctoral dissertation on Soviet decision-making from 1984 to 1986. Who would think of writing something like that? Amazing. And UCLA has made you the alumnus of the year. You got their highest medal. You also have honorary doctorates from Brandeis, Amherst, JTS, and Syracuse. You've published so many articles besides these books, obviously, and you've been involved in so much of U.S. policy when it comes to Middle East peacemaking. You've been in with all the different presidents that you worked under. Tell me, you also worked under Secretary Clinton as well. You're involved in the peace process, which, tell us a little bit about peacemaking. Tell us a little bit about what it is to be a peacemaker. You were involved in the Oslo, you were involved in Jordan and Israel in the peace process. What is it like to step in there, and how does someone represent the United States and be able to express United States policy without the president standing over your head answering questions? How does that work?
Well, first, you have to know all the issues.
Of course.
Second, you have to be absorbed in it. You have to know who the players are. You have to understand what the nature of the differences are, and you have to think about what are the ways to try to bridge those differences. You don't really need the president there. You need to be in a position where you're creating circumstances where if presidential involvement could make a difference, you bring the president in. But the essence of being a negotiator is to understand the essence of what each side needs when you're especially mediating, not what they want. You don't reconcile wants, you reconcile needs. As a mediator, you also have to get each side to take account of the other side's needs and to sort of show them, if their needs are going to be met, the only way their own needs can be met is if they also address the other side. So it's not by definition, it's not a simple thing to do. By definition, the more historic the nature of the conflict, the harder it is to do it. The harder it is for each side to see anything except their own sense of grievance, their own sense of loss, and their own sense of what it is they need to get. I often used to say that when you're explaining one side to the other, they don't really want to hear about it. They want to see that you understand what they need, and you spend a lot of your time proving that you understand what they need before you can even address the other side.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. You worked under the Reagan administration. You worked with Republicans, with Democrats.
Right.
Clinton, how is it to be bipartisan, working with different parties as a person who's part of the political process?
not easy these days. I mean, there was a time when the notion that politics ended at the water's edge was actually a kind of spirit. It was actually something that I think was taken as something that was good, something that should guide the way we approach foreign policy and approach what we do about it. I think we've become more polarized, more partisan. It's harder and harder to identify people who can actually work across party lines. In the past, there was a bigger center. The center has shrunk, the fringes have grown. It makes it harder to be bipartisan. I think for Israel, Israel's well-being in the relationship to the United States depends heavily on Israel being a nonpartisan issue. Israel can't be a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. It has to be an American issue. And whenever one tries to make it more of a partisan issue, they basically are threatening some of the underpinnings of the relationship, which overall I remain optimistic about. I mean, I look at the sweep of history, I see how the relationship has evolved. I look at Israel compared to everyone else in the Middle East. There are no other democracies in the Middle East. Every other country in the Middle East is feeling strains and threats. The whole state system in the Middle East is under assault. And yet Israel is one state that is fully legitimate. Israel is one state where it has a rule of law, a separation of powers. It's one state where it has institutions. You know, it's the only state in the region that has freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, where women's rights are respected, where gay rights are respected. There is no other state in the region. So that gives me confidence against the backdrop of all the turmoil and struggle and in a sense, conflict over basic identity that exists in the Middle East and will go on for some time.
Ambassador Ross, you obviously have a passion for the Israel-American relationship, and that's why you wrote this book, and that's why you are here speaking to the public about this right now as well. Do you feel that there's been a big change, or do you feel that it's steadily grown from the time, from 1948 when Israel became a state until 2016 where we're almost there approaching? Do you feel that there's been a growth? Do you feel that there's been a stagnant? Do you feel it's been a wavy? How do you feel the relationship? Because, you know, your book is from Truman to Obama, so we're talking a great deal of that period of time. How do you feel the relationship has changed or grown or wavered?
Well, the title has an irony in it. It's called Doomed to Succeed. And what I meant by that was there will be differences, there will be ups and downs, but the basic trajectory is in a favorable direction. Look at where we started this relationship. Truman had to overcome the opposition of all of his senior national security advisors, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Intelligence Committee. All of the national security officials in his administration were against his recognizing the State of Israel. All of them. Now, you know, it took till the Kennedy administration for us to sell arms to Israel. Truman didn't, Eisenhower didn't. Kennedy broke the taboo on providing arms. It took until the Reagan administration until Israel was treated for the first time as an asset, and from a strategic standpoint. So there's been an evolution, but that evolution has also become increasingly institutionalized. You look at the connections between our militaries, between the defense establishments, between the intelligence communities. You see a set of economic connections that didn't exist. There's scientific connections that didn't exist. You know, we have ties to Israel not only because we share values, but also because we share interests, and also because we share threats. Those who threaten the United States also threaten Israel and vice versa. So there's been a natural evolution, and it will continue. One of the reasons I say doomed to succeed is because, notwithstanding some of the differences, you look at the region, and Israel is the only friend and pillar we can count on in a region that's characterized by enormous uncertainty and instability. I think that has helped to account for why we are where we are. It doesn't mean that you can be complacent in the relationship. It doesn't mean you can afford to make the relationship overly partisan, because I think that will come back to haunt us and to haunt Israelis as well as Americans. It doesn't mean that we should ignore what is the changes taking place in this country. We will become a majority country in about 25 to 30 years. Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, African Americans will come to constitute the majority. those communities don't have a history of connections to Israel. So there is a need to reach out to them. There's a need to, in a sense, present Israel for what it is, the one and only democracy in the Middle East. So we can't take things for granted, but there also are very powerful bonds that tie us together and create what I think is a reason and explain why we've seen the evolution of the relationship the way we have.
When we look at times of 1945, at the end of World War II, the end of the Holocaust, and for about 5 years, or maybe a little bit longer, being anti-Semitic was taboo. It was taboo.
Right.
But here we are now in the 2000s, and anti-Semitism has again shown its ugly face. It, in some cases, right out publicly. Neo-Nazism isn't so popular as anti-Semitism itself is, and growing. And in Europe, anti-Semitic acts, terrorist acts towards Jews, especially in Paris, probably I would say is probably the largest Jewish community where it's really felt and seen on a semi-regular basis. How do you explain the reemergence, that's the word I'm looking for, the reemergence, and that the tabooism of it after a Holocaust just kind of fades away?
I think there's a new anti-Semitism that is tied up with the effort to delegitimize Israel. The delegitimization of Israel is something that is the kind of embodiment of this, because in a sense, if you're Jewish and you support Israel, then you're delegitimized as well. So those who are trying to say that Israel doesn't have a right to exist, that there shouldn't be this separate state of the Jewish people, by definition, it goes beyond that. It means that anybody who identifies with it must be wrong. And we're seeing, I think, there is a predisposition on the part of those who are trying to discredit Israel to say, look, this is not anti-Semitic, it's just anti-Zionist. But in fact, the anti-Zionists, as a rule, also tend to be anti-Semitic. They may deny it, they try to dress it up, but if you're saying that a Jewish state doesn't have a right to exist, what else are you saying? Mm-hmm. You're saying anybody who supports it, by definition, must be wrong, must be illegitimate. Mm-hmm. And I think that helps to account for some of what we've seen. Criticisms of Israel, there is a legitimate space to criticize Israeli policies. There is not a legitimate space to somehow try to turn that into something that is also delegitimizing the Jewish people.
All right, so two things are on my mind. The first one I want to go to is, and they're both current, is the Obama administration. Many people, especially Republicans, but many people come along and say that President Obama has lost the strength of support or showing it publicly and done things against Israel, such as when Netanyahu spoke before Congress and so many Democrats followed the president in refusing to be there, that this is a slap in the face to Israel. This is the first time in many decades that someone, a president of the United States and his followers have done so. Do you feel that this is a danger to Israel? Do you feel that this is a regression?
No, because I think that we've seen before, the book points out the relationships we've seen where there's been tension between presidents and prime ministers. Ronald Reagan, the low point of the U.S.-Israeli relationship took place during the Reagan administration. During the time of the siege of Beirut, after Sabra and Shatila, Reagan made it very clear that it was very difficult to be a friend that Begin made it very difficult to be a friend of Israel. And yet, in the same administration later on, the most significant transformation of the relationship took place. Reagan turned Israel into a strategic partner. George H.W. Bush, described himself as one lonely man against thousands of lobbyists on the loan guarantee issue. And yet, later on, he actually went along with the loan guarantees when Yitzhak Rabin became prime minister. He presided over 44 countries establishing diplomatic relations or reestablishing diplomatic relations with Israel because he pressured them to do so. Bill Clinton, who in many ways was probably emotionally the most connected and committed to Israel of any president. There was one point when he was so angry at Netanyahu, when Netanyahu came to the country, he wouldn't see him, he wouldn't talk to him, their planes were parked next to each other at LAX. we have a tendency to look at the moment, take a snapshot, and think that somehow this is the worst we've ever seen, but it tends to be divorced from the historical reality. And we should, I'm not saying we should dismiss some of the tensions we see. I am saying that you need to put it in a perspective and realize it's not the first time we've seen this. It may not be the last time we've seen it, but the relationship is larger than the individuals. And the relationship has become institutionalized, and one of the both challenges and one of the larger purposes should be to deepen those institutional ties. But as I said, one of the things that I think can threaten that is partisanship. What happened when Prime Minister Netanyahu came and spoke to the Congress in March was an invitation that was worked out only with the Republicans. It isn't just that it was worked out behind the back of the administration, it was worked out with the Republican leadership, and the Democratic leadership wasn't even informed of it. So you can't operate on that basis and then expect it has no consequence here. So I would say, the relationship obviously between the President and the Prime Minister is not a great relationship.
Strained at this point.
It certainly is strained, there certainly is a tension. But I think, they're going to meet on November 9th. They both have an interest in trying to mend fences, because there is a larger relationship here that matters. And again, put it in perspective, not only from a historical standpoint, but look at the region. This is a region that is consumed by conflict. And the conflict is a terrible conflict, and the conflict is over something as basic as identity and who's going to define it. Well, the only state that isn't facing that kind of a threat is Israel. So we have an interest, obviously, in having that relationship be as strong as possible.
Your Russian connection. Right now, Russia currently, as we're taping, is flying bombing missions over Syria. They say they're going after ISIS. The others who are observers are saying they're going after the rebels, and they're really helping Assad. What do you think is really happening, and is this a danger to Israel, or is it something that Israel can really let go?
Well, it's not so simple for Israel, but let's look at what is Russia doing. Putin, first of all, is filling a vacuum because he's good at filling vacuums. Putin is acting first to make it clear that Russian interests in Syria are going to be preserved. Any outcome in Syria will have to take into account the Russian presence. If there will ever be a political process, they will be one of the arbiters of that process. They're creating a set of ground rules for whatever is going to happen from now on, and they're ensuring at a minimum that at least a mini-state of Syria, maybe it's an Alawite stand, is going to be preserved that also maintains their presence there. Now, I think there's also a desire on Putin's part to embarrass us and, in a sense, seize center stage internationally. He likes to go around the region and quietly say to the countries in the region, you may not like what we're doing, but you see that we stand by our friends. And it's a contrast with the Americans. That's what he's trying to create. So he doesn't care if he creates more refugees, which he may well do, because I think the character of what they're doing is basically designed to depopulate Syria, increasingly of Sunnis. He's not fighting ISIS, he's fighting the non-Sunni ISIS. He hopes to create a reality where the only opposition is ISIS versus Assad, so the only choice then is to support Assad. That won't succeed, because they won't succeed in depopulating all of Syria, but they will increase the number of refugees. Now, one other point on Israel. Israel has acted militarily every time qualitative weapons of a qualitative nature were being provided from the Syrians or the Iranians to Hezbollah. And every time they saw them crossing a certain threshold, they would act. Now, there's a Russian air defense umbrella there. One of the reasons the Israelis are talking to the Russians is to avoid a problem in that regard. I hope that when Prime Minister Netanyahu was in Moscow, one of the things he said was, understand one thing. If we see those kinds of weapons going, we will take them out, and don't get in the way. The Russians are not, Putin is not big in actually taking casualties, and Putin he likes to fill vacuums. He doesn't actually want to do confrontations.
Understand. Very nice. We are here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. I'm here with Ambassador Dennis Ross, who's just released his fourth book, Doomed to Succeed, and we'll be right back.
I am American.
I'm an American.
I am an American. I'm an American.
I am an American.
I am an American. I am an American.
I am an American.
I am an American.
I am an American.
I am an American.
I am an American.
I am an American.
I am an American.
I am an American.
I am an American.
I am an American.
I'm an American.
I am an American.
I am
An American.
I am an American.
I am an American.
I am American.
I am America.
I'm an American.
I'm an American.
I'm an American.
I am an
I
American.
am an American.
I'm an American.
I am an American.
I am an American.
I wouldn't have been at this ceremony if I hadn't been at this ceremony first. Unfortunately, nearly 30% of U.S. high school students aren't making it to graduation, and every one of us, every parent, every friend, and neighbor, has the responsibility to provide the support and encouragement they need to make it through, because we all need to see a lot more of these pictures.
Ma'am, I have to ask you to move to the rear of the bus.
Welcome back. We're here on Take the Three, Rabbi Doug. I'm here with Ambassador Dennis Ross. His latest book, Doomed to Succeed, is what we're talking about in the U.S.-Israeli relationship. And I wanted to really hit, as before our show's over, just a little bit about what's going on currently in Israel.
Yeah.
This new uprising, the terrorist of the terror acts of the people on the streets,
Yes.
the uprising in Ramallah this past week as we tape, terror acts of people walking with knives, stabbing Jews at random, Israelis especially. What do you think is happening and where do you think it's going to go? And they're blaming it all on the Temple Mount. But what is really going on?
Well, I think several things are going on. I think that in my mind, this is not like the first or second Intifada. Those were both organized. There was an infrastructure that was created and was organized. This is more random, more individualized. What it reflects is an increasing alienation of younger Palestinians in their late teens and early 20s, not those who are older, acting primarily as individuals. You don't see groups doing it. You'll see stone throwing, but the stabbings are all individuals. You had one Hamas cell that killed the parents of 4 children.
Terrible.
And that was an organized cell of Hamas, and they carried out other acts, and the Israelis got them. But this is almost impossible to stop unless the climate fundamentally changes. You have, on the one hand, you can say because it's not organized, that's good news, but the fact it's not organized is also bad news, because it's very hard to stop something like that. There is frustration among Palestinians to get their own leadership.
Mm-hmm.
There is frustration among Palestinians that they don't expect that anything can really change.
Mm-hmm.
They believe, they don't see a pathway for achieving their national aspirations. And they're expressing anger and frustration. I think what happened on the Temple Mount was probably a factor just because anytime, if you look historically, go back to 1929, what triggered riots throughout all of Palestine in 1929.
Which was when the big Hebron riots and murders took place.
Yeah, you had an 800-year Jewish presence in Hebron that was wiped out. What triggered that? It was a handbill that the Mufti of Jerusalem put out that showed a Star of David above the Dome of the Rock. So it never existed. But you conjure up an image on something that is so emotionally charged. And if you already are in an environment where you have a kind of combustible mix, it doesn't take much to to create what is something like this that can go on for a while. We have to hope it comes to an end. We also have to, it should be a reminder to us that, you know, you can't assume that everything is going to remain static. At the end of the day, you know, you want two states for two peoples. One state, in the end, means Israel becomes a binational state. That's not the essence of the Zionist dream. So somehow finding a way to be able to separate from Palestinians will become important, but I think we have to be realistic. There is nobody in the Palestinian side right now who is capable of negotiating peace. And so you have to think about what can you do to change the realities on the ground. You have to think about maybe a new approach that focuses more on Arab states. Are Arab states able to assume a responsibility for Palestinians? Because Palestinians, in the end, can't negotiate something on their own. So we may need to think in different ways than we have in the past. We also need to understand something else. The approach can't be, look, we're going to solve everything or do nothing. We can't solve everything right now. And if we say we'll solve everything or do nothing, then we'll end up doing nothing. And when we do nothing, there's a vacuum, and that gets filled by the worst forces.
I understand. So tell me, you know, currently you are the counselor and William Davidson Distinguished Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, and you've been there for about 4 years again, returned there for the last 4 years or so. If they come and say, Dennis, we want you to go and negotiate this thing, would you get up and go again?
Well, obviously I have a deep commitment to trying to resolve this conflict and do whatever I can to contribute. In whatever ways I can. Look, when I'm inside government I try, when I'm outside government I try. I'm committed to trying to do something because I think ultimately this is what is in Israel's best interest, and it's not just that I believe in the U.S.-Israeli relationship, I believe very much in the future of Israel.
Well, I know that anybody who really wants to delve into what we've been talking about should pick up Doomed to Succeed. Dennis Ross, I want to thank you so much, Ambassador, for being on the show. I want to thank all of you for being with us. Remember, you can check out our website, www.tvrabbi.com, where you can also see former shows on the web. If you want to send Ambassador Ross or ask him any questions or find out more about his book, you can send us an email, info@tvrabbi.com. I will forward it to Ambassador Ross and his assistants, and I know they'll get back to you with anything you'd like to know. Thank you again, Ambassador Dennis Ross. Welcome to Chicago, welcome to the show, and thank you for being with us. Hope to see you all next time, right here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. Shalom, everyone.
And I'm talking about Rabbi Doug. Talking about Rabbi Doug. Talking about Rabbi Doug on your TV show. Well, he's the rabbi for me. Anytime you need. You're gonna get married or you're gonna die. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. And I'm talking about Rabbi Doug. Talking about Rabbi Doug. Talking about Rabbi Doug on your TV show. Well, he's the rabbi for me. Anytime you need. You're gonna get married or you're gonna die. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug on the TV tonight.
To find out more about Taped with Rabbi Doug, go to www.tvrabbi.com. This has been a Taped with Rabbi Doug production.